Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rogers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rogers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Lays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for September the 25th, the last show of September, at least on Wednesday anyways. And so we've got a great show lined up for you. My main man, the hardest working dude on the Gamecock beat, Hale McGranahan from the BigSpur.com, will join us in just a few minutes. Let's jump right into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Lancaster area. Nana's Porch, your backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue. Nana's Porch has got you covered. And now the award-winning pimento cheese is available online. It arrives in 2 days, I'm told, at least to the upstate of South Carolina. Free shipping. All you have to do is go to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Click on pimento cheese. It'll take you to a hyperlink where you can order the pimento cheese. There are several options. Southern Foods will deliver it, shipped in a cold container with dry ice right to your front door, and it is delicious. This is the #1 pimento cheese in the South, quite frankly. Okay, voted #1 and #2 by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association the last 2 out of 3 years in the meat and cheese category. So I strongly urge all of you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne at nanasporch.com. Order that pimento cheese. If you order it today, it'll be there in time for Saturday for a part to add a great addition to your game day spread. All right, so South Carolina will face Ole Miss a week from Saturday at 3:30 on ABC. That should be a good one. Hopefully, I do feel great about Lenora Sellers. Hopefully, Rocket Sanders. To me, that was really one of the very few negatives coming out of the Akron game. We'll talk more about that with Hale. The game is officially a garnet out. I don't know how that'll look. I think the white out and the blackout shows up much better, but I'm interested to see. Dawn Staley and South Carolina's women opened up pursuit of their 4th national championship, trying to go back-to-back for the first time since UConn did it in the previous decade. She did address the status of Ashlyn Watkins, saying, quote, she's still suspended. We're going to wait for her situation to die down a little bit. First appearance, court appearance date is set for October 25th. Quite frankly, I expect there to be resolution on that date that could lead to her reinstatement. How quickly will she be back in the lineup? I don't know, but I think by mid to late December at the latest. Good friend of the show and former sports director at WOLO TV 25 in Columbia, Mike Gillespie, has been named the general manager of 1801 Media Company, which was created by the Garnet Trust, the college sports company, and No Cap Sports. Mike will be fantastic in this role. I can't wait. We exchanged texts last night when the news broke. I texted him to congratulate him. He's coming back on the show soon. Hopefully, maybe next Wednesday, we can get him on to talk about his new role, the demise of Sunbelt Billy, the state of some of the SEC dumpster fires, and the Gamecocks. So we'll look forward to that. And in the WTF and the rule of unintended consequences, UNLV is 3-0 for the first time since 1984. They went on the road and upset top 25 Kansas. They're almost in the top 25. They're right behind number 25 Boise State. And their starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, who transferred from Holy Cross after spending 4 years there, announced last night on social media that he's sitting out the rest of the season. He's become a holdout. He said, I committed to UNLV based on certain representations that were made to me, which were not upheld after I enrolled. Despite discussions, it became clear that these commitments will not be fulfilled in the future. I wish my teammates the best of luck this season and hope for the continued success of the program. All right, so I'm just going to say this. Your teammates, quite frankly, don't give a rat's you-know-what about you after you are doing that to them. They're, like I said, 53 points in the AP poll, just 16 points behind number 25 Boise. They upset Kansas on the road in week 3. They began the season with a victory over Houston, making them 2-0 against the Big 12. Sluka, though quite frankly not great statistics, just 21 of 48, 318 yards, 6 touchdowns, so 1 interception, and has rushed 39 times for 286 yards. Let's bring in my good friend, Hale McGranahan of thebigspur.com. Hale, how are you, my friend?
Doing all right. How are you doing, kind sir?
I'm doing well. Hale, it's great to see you. Great to have you back on the show. Glad to see your daughter is feeling better. How's the family doing? Hopefully everybody is 100% in the McGranahan household.
Yeah, everyone's doing well. Appreciate that. We're just plugging along into this first bye week of the season.
The first of 2 bye weeks. this season. And so, Hale, I got to ask, number one, if you had to handicap Braves make the playoffs, what say you, yay or nay?
I'm gonna say yay. I like that start last night. That was good. I like our pitching. Hopefully, Michael Harris can continue carrying the team sort of like he did last night. Get some contributions from a couple other guys, and maybe get a little positive momentum going into the playoffs. Make a little run. So I think it's happening.
I mean, honestly, a couple of these rookie pitchers, and then I never expected the season the Braves have gotten from Chris Sale. I mean, you lose a Cy Young candidate in Spencer Strider. You lose the reigning MVP in Ronald Acuna Jr., although certainly Shohei Ohtani's going to win it this year. But then just the long litany of injuries. Murphy, Ozzie Albies, Riley, and others. If the Braves do make the playoffs and make a run, this could be even more improbable than the year they won the World Series after losing Acuna and some other guys.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he was really the only injury that season, only significant one. And yeah, I mean, there has been all sorts of guys in and out of the lineup. I mean, Strider, that was pretty tough loss. And then I think maybe Sale has made up for that and then some, probably with how he's pitched this season. Schwellenbach coming along, pitched great last night again. And yeah, it's cool that Soler is back. I like that vibe, having him back on the team again this season. So hopefully get some guys clicking. I like Ozzie being just on the right side of the plate. Hopefully that
yes,
will pay off too.
I agree.
Yeah,
no doubt about it. All right, so Hale, right as you were coming on, I was wrapping up this the first, I guess, big time holdout of the NIL era. Matthew Sluka, the quarterback from Holy Cross, who went to UNLV. They're 3-0. They're right outside the top 25. They've got 2 wins over Big 12 teams, including an upset of Kansas. They're 3-0 for the first time since 1984. And he's like, nope, y'all didn't come through. Peace out. I'm red shirting, and I'll go someplace else next year. Your thoughts?
I don't know who to believe, Keith. It's there have been some interesting tweets popping up from some media folks who are, I guess, taking the side or coming to the defense of UNLV. And it's pretty obvious, like, where those those bits of information are emanating from. Obviously, they're defensive of UNLV and saying, you know, what Carl Reed, who's at 24/7 with us, is posted that UNLV has lived up to all their obligations and agreement, and he said that Sluka has hired an agent. He and his family hired an agent, and they collectively decided that his market value has increased. Well, of course, the agents thought that. Of course, the families, if they're looking to keep cashing in, of course, they're going to say that. And yeah, sure, it's true. If he's playing well at a higher level than what he was previously, like, sure, your market value is going to increase. But I don't know, man. I mean, if that side of the story is true, like if UNLV has lived up to everything they promised him and all that, then that's pretty crappy on Sluka's part. But if UNLV has not come through, that's crappy on their part. Me personally, what I tend to think, Keith, I would think that the professionals, being the coaches and the guys whose livelihoods are on the line, like, they're probably not going to mess around and put themselves in position to where it might make it harder for them to get more transfers in the future, to get a bigger job than UNLV down the road. Like it's in those guys' best interest long term to not horse around with that stuff and potentially handcuff themselves down the road. Like there's a much longer term play here for the coaches than there is for Matthew Sluka, for example, who's only got another year or so of football left. Like he's probably not going to play in the pros. So it's probably in his best interest to grab all the money he can while he can, because that faucet's going to turn off. Like it would not make any sense for Barry Odom, who was once the head coach at Missouri, to do something like not live up to their end of the bargain. Like that to me is where I'm kind of like side-eyeing Sluka and saying like, I don't know, man. Like, did they really not pay you what they said they would? Did they really say we're cutting you off? Like we're not gonna like I just find that hard to believe. Like those guys have way too much to lose for that to happen. Never mind the fact that they're off to a hot start on the field and trying to have a great season. Like why wouldn't they live up to their end of the bargain? That to me that doesn't add up.
I agree. And Hale, quite frankly, him wishing his teammates all the best for the rest of the season, I'm pretty sure his teammates do not feel the same way about him quitting after 3 weeks, because his agent, if true, wants to renegotiate and increase the market value. I mean, he is completing less than 50% of his passes on the season. I mean, he is, 6 touchdowns to 1 interception and rushed for 286 yards. But you just can't agree to something and then say, an agent come in and say, oh, hey, is it Scott Boras? I mean, that's who it sounds like to me. Hey, my guy's market value's increased. You need to be paying him this amount now, 30% increase, or he's out. I mean, no. I don't know. I know a few years ago there were some rumors that Ohio State was overpromising and under-delivering with NIL, and maybe that had something to do with Desmond Umeozulu coming to South Carolina. But again, Ohio State has no excuse with all the money they have. But I guess this is just the age in which we live, Hale. Greed rules the day.
I've seen, of course, over the years, sort of general comments about, hey, there are people out there promising you're going to get something for transferring here, and this will be your NIL. Then, saying, hey, you know what, you're maybe not getting what you're promised. But I've not heard or seen or read or come across any specific examples. Like I haven't seen any players who have been like, hey, I went to, Allsep University and they told me they'd give me $50,000 and I only got 25. Like I haven't seen any of that. Maybe it's out there, but I don't know where it is. And I'm sure I'm sure it's happened. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just keep going back to like, man, those UNLV coaches have a whole lot more to lose than Matthew Sluka by not paying him what he's allegedly owed. And that's more the problem to me, is like there's no transparency with any of this. So it's like, if we could just make these deals public, sign them to contracts, or make them actual employees,
Right.
A lot of these problems can go away just with that. So, it's a mess.
I agree. All right. Well, so let's talk about the Gamecocks, Hale. I mean, obviously, the Kentucky game was kind of a big shock after what we saw to open the season against Old Dominion. Then South Carolina jumps out 17-0 and 24-10 against LSU. But in the end, too many costly penalties, too many mistakes. And I thought in particular, and look, nobody, if Lenore Sellers is healthy for the second half of that game, South Carolina probably wins anyway. Maybe not. And then, you go to Akron. Robbie Ashford gets a week worth of reps, and nobody's going to confuse Akron's defense for an SEC defense, Hale, but I thought he looked like a completely different player just throwing the football. I thought he made some beautiful throws. He's a really good runner. He's kind of like, how the car dealers, they have the big streamers that they got the fans on that are, he's got a lot of wiggle and a lot of body lean. But just your assessment of him on Saturday, of Lenore Sellers, and on the Gamecocks through the first third of the season.
Yeah, Robbie was pretty fantastic. If you look at the stats, that tells you all you need to know. I think a little early on, it looked like he was still trying to kind of find his way and get comfortable. Maybe wasn't seeing the field as well as he probably was later on in the game. I think that the opponent is obvious. Like, I don't think anybody's getting too wrapped up in like Robbie Ashford mania or saying like, hey, maybe this is a guy who should be starting because of that game. But it was a nice performance by him. Yeah, nice performance by him, and I'm sure Lenoris would have probably put up very similar numbers if he was playing. Like I think that's probably safe to say. But Ashford still deserves credit. Like he played really well, and I like the comparison you made to his running style, Keith. That's pretty funny. But at the very least, it makes you feel pretty good about what your insurance policy is, especially if Lenoris isn't quite healthy enough to play next week. We'll see how that looks. But at the very least, it makes you feel a little bit better about what's behind him. With Lenoris, go ahead.
Davis Bevel came in. The first pass, he throws off his back foot like 55 yards in the air and hits the guy right in the chest. After he got pushed in the end zone, he couldn't come up with it. I mean, even he made some quality throws.
Yeah, I mean, and to Shane Beamer's credit, he's been pretty bullish on both of those guys and consistently had good things to say about the entire quarterback room, not just Lenoris. So I don't think that was necessarily just coach speak from him. So yeah, I think you feel decent enough about what you got. Certainly, you don't want to have to make a habit out of that, but it's one of those things that it's certainly better than the alternative, which we've seen around here semi recently, where you don't feel good at all about what's next at quarterback. And some people might be sitting here listening saying, well, hey, what about the LSU game? How about that second half when Ashford came in? Well, it's really tough for any quarterback to come in off the bench like that and play against a quality opponent. It's going to be challenging. And yeah, he was 2 of 4 passing and didn't attempt many throws. but there was one deep ball to Delvon Campbell that got called back that if there wasn't an offensive pass interference, that game's result might be different than what it ended up being. So certainly would have made the stats look better. I
thought that was the most egregious penalty of the game. Quite frankly,
I totally agree. And meaning Ashford had to come in for a little bit in the Kentucky game as well, and sort of kept the offense's nose above water too, while Lenore's was getting looked at and made sure he was good enough to play, so healthy enough to play. So Ashford's played a decent amount already this year, not just in that Akron game. And I would venture to guess, just with Lenore's style of playing quarterback, guy who runs a lot, you're going to put yourself in harm's way at times. So again, yeah, it's not a bad insurance policy to have.
So here's really the question for me, though. Do you think the performance, which, by the way, he was, according to Pro Football Focus, he was the number 1 rated college quarterback last Saturday. And by the way, Mazeo Bennett was also the highest rated true freshman on Saturday. But do you think that performance and him going out there and showing that he can really make some big-time throws, like I thought the 2 throws to Gage Larvadain, even the touch he put on the post to Mazeo Bennett, I thought he made, regardless of the defense, he stood in there and made some big-time throws. Do you think that gives Dow Loggins more confidence in him to give him more of the playbook if he has to come in like the LSU game, to where, in the LSU game, you take over after a turnover at the LSU 24 and you run it twice, and then on 3rd and 9, you just run a quarterback sweep and settle for a field goal. Or even on that last drive, after he did make the big-time throw to Delvon Campbell, and he made a nice throw to Vandrevis Jacobs, you just kind of surrender and run it up the middle for 1 yard and try a 49-yard field goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to consider there, Keith, and I believe Dow kind of talked about it last week, was that when you're the backup quarterback, you're not getting all that many reps during practice. So there are probably just things during that week that Dow was just maybe a little hesitant on, because Ashford hadn't really practiced it or gotten that many reps. So maybe there was a little hesitation that way. But if you see it in a game, it's probably going to make you feel better about going to it in the future. So I do think there's something to that line of thought, definitely.
And to your earlier point with the style of play of Lenore Sellers, I think, to me, it makes sense to give Robbie Ashford more reps in practice during the week, because, I mean, like you said, it's the SEC, and with his style, he's got that ankle, he tweaked his hip. I mean, there's probably going to be another situation to where Lenoris is going to have to go out for a little while. And I think particularly in all of the games that South Carolina has coming up, by the way, which to me, outside of Alabama, South Carolina has a puncher's chance virtually against everybody. And I agree with Cocky Joe. Let's give Dow Loggins and Mike Shula a lot of credit for the way both those guys are playing. But I just think you have to be prepared for that situation with a dual threat quarterback. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily how they drew it up when they were going into the portal or shopping in the portal for a quarterback this past offseason. I mean, they had AJ Swan committed initially, then he flipped LSU and signed there, and they had to pivot, and they landed on Robbie Ashford. And I think it ended up being kind of a good miss because you don't really have to change your offense if you go from Sellers to Ashford, whereas Swan isn't really the dual threat type of guy that Sellers and Ashford are. So, yeah, it does allow you to try to keep things mostly the same, if not exactly the same. So, yeah, I mean, I'm always a proponent of having a dual threat quarterback, especially in college. Like, why not give yourself the ability to run the ball with that guy? But it's that double-edged sword. You know, if you keep running and putting him in harm's way, the chances are he's gonna have to hang out on the sideline with something ailing him. And who knows? Maybe Sellers will come back and he'll be fine the rest of the season. But again, just the nature of playing that way, playing that style at quarterback, you're opening yourself up to injuries more so maybe than a guy like Spencer Rattler, who's just sitting in the pocket and the only hits he's taking are sacks. And if he's running, he's looking to get down and slide probably sooner than maybe Lenoris or Robbie, because those guys think they can, outrun everybody, or, they're certainly bigger than Rattler too. Like when you're 6'3", 240-ish, you probably aren't as hesitant about sticking your shoulder into the chest of a safety or even a linebacker for that matter. So, yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, but it's definitely a nice option to have, because as we've seen with this running game, it helps make that thing go a little bit cleaner as well.
No doubt. So, Hale, what's the latest? Have you heard anything from your sources on Rocket Sanders and the extent of his injury or where he's at? I mean, I think Carolina really needs him next Saturday.
No, I haven't checked in with anything behind the scenes. No, Beamer said on Sunday that he was kind of banged up and would probably be really, if I'm remembering correctly, would probably be really questionable if they had a game this week. I would imagine that Sanders probably hadn't done much in practice so far these last couple days. Beamer's got a SEC coaches teleconference here in about an hour and a half or so. So I'll be certainly interested to hear what he's got to say there, but I don't have anything to pass along this time.
All right, so I was going to get into talking about players, and then I noticed you wrote an article on South Carolina's best 10 players through the first 4 games. So I'm going to skip that part and just encourage everybody to go to the Big Spur and read your story. And if you're not a member, that's probably worth a month's subscription right there, along with all the recruiting news. And so let's switch to recruiting, because South Carolina had a ton of recruits on campus, several surprise visitors, and then they sell it out for Akron and have kids back again for that one, and more players. And so let's start with the South Carolina kids first, because there are 2 kids who are young men who committed to, well, really 3, wide receiver Malik Clark from Rock Hill, tight end Mike Tyler, who that's kind of been hot or cold. He was at the LSU game. He is an LSU commit. He came in for the Akron game. That was interesting to me. And then a new offer, linebacker Josh Smith from Dutch Fork, who's been committed to Coastal, but also has an SEC offer from Ole Miss. He's visiting there this weekend. What about those guys? Your thoughts on Malik Clark, particularly, and how could Mazeo Bennett's early success and Florida State's dumpster fire of an offense play a role in South Carolina having a chance to flip him?
Yeah, South Carolina never quit recruiting Malik after he committed to Florida State in July. Dow Loggins, Mike Furry, Shane Beamer, that they've all still been on him. And, the Monday before the Akron game, Malik told me he was interested in getting back down to Columbia for a game. Wanted to see his buddy Mazeo play. He's been impressed by how that's played out for Mazeo. And if you're a recruit who wants to play immediately, it's always nice to see a guy at your position who's playing immediately as a freshman as well. So and they'll play two different positions at receiver. Like if Malik Clark comes to South Carolina, he's probably going to be playing in some different spots, doing some different things than what Mazeo has been doing these last 4 games. So certainly different types of receivers. So I think that's a plus. I don't know how much the start to Florida State season has affected Malik and where he's at with his commitment. I don't know if I could quantify that. It wouldn't be fair for me to sit here and speculate on that because it would be speculation for sure. But Tallahassee is still a long way away from Rock Hill. I mean, that was the case 3 months ago, and it'll be the case in 3 months when Malik's got to sign, less than 3 months. So South Carolina's always had that in their favor. You didn't mention North Carolina, Keith, and speaking of dumpster fires,
it's basketball season in North Carolina.
Yeah, and they may need a new football coach here pretty soon too, and maybe that helps South Carolina's cause too, because UNC was certainly a factor for Malik, and if he's truly looking around and seeing what his other options are, it helps South Carolina's cause that UNC is where they're at right now with Mac Brown with 1 foot out the door. So that helps too. Still some work to be done there for South Carolina.
Isn't that what
what's that?
Hey, I was just going to ask, isn't there, there's a tight end that South Carolina really liked that committed to North Carolina, Marshall Pritchett from Raven Gap, 6'5", 215.
Yeah, and he's from Charleston.
I think he's definitely the one guy, South Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't know where things are at with him, but certainly a name that I'm keeping an eye on for sure. I don't want people to read into that statement quite yet, but yeah, definitely with all that's played out with Mac Brown these last few days. For sure. But yeah, Mike Tyler, like you said, Keith, been sort of hot and cold. Whether it's South Carolina being hot and cold or Mike Tyler being hot and cold on South Carolina, it's been a little bit of both. So we shall see how that plays out. Josh Smith was an interesting offer, and kind of similar to a lot of these other linebackers who are committed to the Gamecocks in 25, and he's played a good bit at defensive end throughout his high school career, but profiles more as a linebacker, and a guy who's been on the radar for this coaching staff for a couple years now. I mean, people kind of hem and haw about Carolina not recruiting Dutch Fork, and that's very overblown. Like, they recruit Dutch Fork, they evaluate the players. It's just they don't always come across guys that are worth offering. And Smith, like I said, he played a lot of defensive end, and he started playing linebacker this season, and he's 6'2", 225, and he's going to be a linebacker in college, and I think South Carolina was ready to make the move, and they're going to go after him because he's a good player, and it's pretty clear that he's got some other folks who feel the same way, whether it's Ole Miss or NC State or Memphis, and I'm guessing there'll probably be some others who pop up along the way. And yeah, getting him back in for back-to-back games was a good sign. I mean, yes, he's committed to Coastal, and obviously it's a lower level, but he'd kind of been planning to go down to Coastal for their game against Virginia this past Saturday, then stuck around in Columbia and went to the Akron game. So certainly something you would expect to happen if you're South Carolina. Not a tough competition that way, but pretty good sign. So we'll see how things shake out with him at Ole Miss this weekend, and certainly keep an eye on it moving forward. I'm sure he'll be back another time or two for games in Williams-Brice this fall.
So Craig in the Nana's Porch chat box asked about Mikael Skinner. I mean, I didn't ask you about him because I think to me it's kind of just a matter of when on that one, or at least that's my take on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. There are a lot of options out there for South Carolina. At tight end, receiver, they've obviously got a few committed already. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll have to kind of wait and see.
All right, so there are two kids from Georgia that are committed to Rutgers. Defensive back Michael Clayton from Warner Robins, and then defensive tackle Braxton Kyle, 6'4", 320 from North Gwinnett. And then you got just in Georgia, the Georgia Tech offensive tackle commit Damola Ajdahan, and you've got not a native of Georgia, but playing at Grayson, who was on campus, defensive tackle Joseph Mabachu, who this is his first year playing football, but a big athletic kid. And I think it's kind of just a matter when, not if, Billy Napier is let go at Florida. So just your thoughts on some Georgia kids there. And, of course, Kevin Wynn, who's already made an official visit to South Carolina, who's a FSU commitment for the time being.
Yeah, the two Rutgers guys, I'll start with them. Michael Clayton visited for the Akron game. He does not have an offer from South Carolina. So I wouldn't label him as a flip target just yet. Braxton Kyle, the defensive tackle, he's not visited South Carolina yet. I don't know if there's anything that's been scheduled. And until that happens, I don't know that we can legitimately talk about him as an option, but certainly keeping an eye on him. Mbachau, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, the guy who's committed to Florida out of Grayson High School. He's got a lot of big-time suitors. Braxton Kyle does as well, for that matter. But a good sign that the Carolina got him in for the Akron game, and certainly need to get him back. I would guess the next step is trying to set up an official visit. Wynn was one of those surprise guests for the LSU game, and again, a lot of big-time suitors. I mean, Georgia and Texas are involved with him. So yeah, stiff competition there. And who else was there? I lost track. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, Keith.
I think that Damola Ajdahan, the offensive tackle from Duluth, who's committed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he committed to Georgia Tech. He's got an Ohio State offer. They recently jumped on him. I think Georgia's making a move. So again, like some stiff competition there, I think, with him and those other guys for that matter. Is probably just a situation where we'll just have to kind of wait and see who pushes and how seriously they push. If it's, we're talking about a bunch of Georgia guys, so if the Dogs are serious about going after them, that's going to be tough to pull off. Texas is clearly one of the hot teams in college football right now, not just in recruiting, but with what they're doing on the field. Arguably the best team in the country right now. They've flipped a couple guys, or are in the process of flipping a couple guys from Florida State already. So that might make things challenging for Kevin Wynn, who's, I think, maybe an hour out of Athens. So those might be the kind of the main two for him, for example. So a lot of competition, and it's certainly hasn't deterred South Carolina from recruiting guys of that caliber, and certainly does not mean they can't go win these battles, especially if the season keeps going really well.
All right, so 5-star defensive end Jared Smith from I think Alabama. He was on campus. Of course, he committed to Auburn. And by the way, we're talking about dumpster fires. Quite frankly, with all the Yellowwood money, Hale, to me, it's egregious for Auburn not to have a better quarterback situation. And quite frankly, they should. They probably wish they had Robbie Ashford back. But talk about Jared Smith, and then the last one I'll ask you is Landon Duckworth, who had been committed as a quarterback for 2026. It looks like maybe there's some rekindling there. Your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, with Smith, Keith, I thought it was very telling that he was willing to show up for a noon game in Columbia a day after he played. Like he had a game Friday night in Alabama, and it's, I don't know, maybe about a 5-hour drive for him to get to Columbia. And that's a very quick turnaround. And Auburn did have a home game that day. Granted, it was against, I guess, New Mexico, and South Carolina LSU was game day and a much bigger game. And anybody would, neutral observer would pick South Carolina LSU over Auburn, New Mexico all day, every day. But again, quick turnaround, long drive. That there's something to be said for all that. So we'll see how that continues to play out. I mean, South Carolina was very much in the mix for him right up until he committed. Wasn't surprised that he committed to Auburn. But Gamecocks certainly haven't gone away, and I think they'll continue to be a factor right up until December whenever he signs. So yeah, certainly would be a big get. 5-star defensive end who's a really good player and has his best football ahead of him too. Like he's only going to get better. With Duckworth, even though he decommitted from South Carolina, I guess it was over the summer. It was one of those situations where he wanted to take a step back because he did commit very early, like I think before his sophomore year, the summer before his sophomore year, which is, quarterbacks do commit early, but not quite that early. that was early. So he wanted to make sure he's made the right decision. And, Carolina understood that, and they've continued to recruit him. And they've been optimistic that they can get him back in for a visit really all along since he decommitted. And I think that's going to happen here. Whether it's October or November, I think that's going to take shape.
All right, there you have it from the hardest working man on the Gamecock beat, and hopefully your prediction on the Braves will come true. Hale, great stuff as always. Thanks for being so generous with your time, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road. All the best to you and your family.
All right, Keith. Much appreciated. Be well, my friend.
All right. That was Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com. All right, let's go through a lot of comments in the Nana's Porch chat box. Again, you're 2 clicks away from getting the best pimento cheese in the South, especially the smoky jalapeno. It's unbelievable. Last night on the Garnet and Black Town Hall, one patron just gushed about it, and after he ordered it 2 days later, it was on his front porch. He couldn't believe it, and the shipping was no charge. So again, go to nanasporch.com, nanasporch.com. You're 2 clicks away. Go to the top, click on pimento cheese. Then there's a hyperlink. You can order different sets. You can order the regular flavor and smoky jalapeno. You can order 2 of each, 1 of each, 2 of the same, either great flavor. So Cocky Joe says, thought Mikael Skinner would have made a move after decommitting from Cincinnati. I'm not going to speak for Hale, but kind of reading between the lines, maybe South Carolina wants to wait a little bit with some of the renewed interest from some of these other guys. J-Rock Media says, despite it being a lesser team, I was proud of Ashford's performance and believe he can do a good job against better competition as well. I mean, I agree. And look, I think this is not the National Football League. It's college football. You have a dual threat quarterback. You have to have another guy ready to go, which to me means even though Lenoris is a younger player, Robbie Ashford probably needs more reps in practice, because on any play you can lose your quarterback. And it was clear in the LSU game, Don Loggins did not really have confidence in Ashford to throw the football. I was impressed with Davis Bevel as well. I think, it just means a lot to him getting that opportunity. He is a 6th-year guy. He's played a lot of college football, and he's playing for his home state team. He threw his first touchdown pass since 2021, and he is a really big kid. Cocky Joe says Ashford has to develop confidence. I agree. He is a viable backup, and I think that game should give him confidence that, South Carolina could have 2 starting level quarterbacks. I was, look, again, nobody's confusing Akron with LSU or Ole Miss or Alabama or Texas A&M or Clemson on defense, or Missouri. But I guarantee you Hugh Freeze wishes he had him. And speaking of that, what a dumpster fire. I mean, you now have home losses to Cal and to Arkansas. I mean, you're basically letting the pit boss climb up out of the fire pit. So to me, the biggest things that stick out about South Carolina, the negatives, I think there are a lot of positives. The number of players, Gage Larvadain, I believe, is a difference maker. He's finally healthy now. I thought Dale Von Campbell, he almost took one to the house. He had that big catch that was called back on just an egregious penalty in the LSU game that probably cost South Carolina the win, quite frankly. Despite the questionable horse collar, which by definition, it was not an abrupt pull down. I did think on Nick Emanwari's pick 6 that did rise to the level of a blindside block. But you can't jump off sides on 4th and 3 when they throw an incomplete pass. And you can't have the false start penalties and holding penalties. I mean, you just can't do it. South Carolina still had too many penalties. They've given up 16 sacks in 4 games. I hope Shane Beamer can understand that math, because at his last Tuesday press conference, they'd given up 13 in 3 games. And he said, what's that? A little over 3 a game? No, it's over 4 a game. Now it is 4 per game. Akron had 2 sacks in their first 3 games, and they had 3 sacks against South Carolina. Now, I did think Josiah Thompson got beat inside on one. I thought Oscar Attaway, the third, he missed a blitz pickup. And so 2 of the 3 sacks, you can kind of look at those guys. I do think the quarterbacks are holding the ball too long, but too many penalties. Still 7 penalties against Akron, 13 against LSU, although 2 or 3 of those probably not that justifiable. But that's 20 penalties in 2 games. And South Carolina, third down offense is still, even after the Akron game where they had to convert 4 out of 5 fourth downs, is only 30% on the season. They got to get better at third down on offense. I do think, one guy I wanted to ask Hale about, we didn't have time, is Southern Durham defensive lineman Isaiah Campbell, 6'4", 260. He's a 4-star guy who decommitted from Clemson this week. There's some pictures on social media of him and Gamecock commitment Tayshawn Alston exchanging jerseys. Tayshawn Alston on X really recruiting him for the Gamecocks, and that's a guy, if I'm South Carolina, I would have flooded the state of North Carolina this week and gone wherever North Carolina and NC State have commitments and been trying to get those guys to come in for the Ole Miss game, as well as Isaiah Campbell. So, I mean, you look at the schedule, Ole Miss, I know South Carolina's going to be an underdog. Ole Miss is a top 6 team in the country. But quite frankly, and I've said this a bunch, the next time Lane Kiffin wins a big SEC road game, it'll be the first time. Alabama certainly will be challenging with their quarterback, who I think is fantastic. They got a lot of talent, and they have one of the best head coaches in the country. And I thought Kalen DeBoer was the right guy for that job, and I think he's a guy who could probably coach in the National Football League one day. I think Oklahoma's winnable. They had anointed this redshirt freshman after their quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, transferred to Oregon. They've already benched him. Now they're going with a true freshman. We saw Oklahoma's offense was kind of anemic. And look, Tennessee, be glad, Gamecocks, you're not playing Georgia and Tennessee this year. Florida, I wish we were playing. Dumpster fire. Auburn, dumpster fire. Mississippi State, dumpster fire. I'd much rather be playing Auburn and Mississippi State than Alabama and Ole Miss. I do think Oklahoma is winnable. Texas A&M is winnable, although I am going to give Bowling Green props. They played Penn State to a 1-score game. They led the majority of that game. They took Texas A&M to the wire, but that's a winnable game. At Vanderbilt, more problematic. Jerry Kill and his quarterback coming in has really revolutionized Vanderbilt's offense. Their defense is playing well, and if their kicker could have made a 31-yard field goal, hell, they may still be playing that game against Missouri, which leads me to Missouri. You know, they will be a better team in November than they are now. That's just Eli Drinkowitz. He is a great coach. That game is at home. To me, that's winnable. Certainly Wofford, you better have an Akron-type performance. And then at Clemson, to me, that's still a winnable game. I mean, South Carolina could still win 8 or 9 games. And if they get to 9 wins, then you're probably in the discussion for the top 12 in the college football playoff. I think recruiting, South Carolina will poach some guys. They will flip some guys. There will be other guys like Jared Smith that pop up, like Kelton McHale, the junior college defensive tackle. South Carolina has a former commitment that is the number 1 junior college player in the country right now. And, you know, you want Xavier Hardy, you know, 6'6", 280 now, listed as the number 1 player in the country out of Macon, Georgia at East Mississippi. You got Kelton McHale, who told Phil Kornblut it's really between South Carolina and Georgia for him, even though he's been committed to Liberty. I mean, how many guys can Georgia take? I mean, at some point, somebody's got to point out, look at all the 4- and 5-star defensive tackles Georgia signed just as South Carolina wanted the last couple of years. So either they're going to get these guys and then guys are going to go in the portal. Something Georgia and defensive linemen. And you really want to flip these in-state guys. To me, you want Malik Clark. I want Skinner, Mike Tyler. You know, maybe you're only taking one of those 2. I don't know. Josh Smith, to me, is a no-brainer. He probably replaces Jaden Breaker, who has an Alabama and LSU offer. Basically, they profile at the same size. But I'd be trying to get Jaden Breaker back on campus too. So Payton Titus still under the weather. I do want to say this on the state of South Carolina women's basketball. Regardless of Ashlyn Watkins or not early in the season, South Carolina's got plenty of players. Okay, you return 4 starters. And quite frankly, your starting backcourt may not be as good or as talented as your second backcourt, which is Malaysia Fulwiley and Tessa Johnson. I'm talking about Raven Johnson and Tahina Paopao. Cocky Joe, you have a good one as well, my man. South Carolina signed maybe the top point guard in the country. Where she's from in the DMV, they call her Maddie Mouse, like Mighty Mouse, because she is 5'9", but she's a jet. Joyce Edwards, the most decorated high school player ever to pick South Carolina, and that includes Asia Wilson, quite frankly. You know, you got big shot Breezy Hall coming back. I think she's going to be pushed by Edwards and maybe Tessa Johnson. And you got Marion Dowda, Chloe Kitts, and Sanaya Fagan, and 6'6" Adele Tack, in addition to Ashlyn Watkins, who will be back at some point. This is an embarrassment of riches. Other teams are trying to load up and duplicate what South Carolina has done. Nobody last year, really the last 2 seasons, has had as deep and as talented a roster as South Carolina. And I think if Dawn Staley had one regret, it's that 2 years ago in that Final Four game against Iowa, she would have leaned on that depth because several of those players were playing better than the starters. But she's adjusted, and they play a lot of players. I mean, I could see until Ashlyn Watkins gets back, I could see either Sanaya Fagan or Miriam Dowda being in that lineup with Chloe Kitts, Breezy Hall, Raven Johnson, and Tahina Powpow. And then, like I said, you got Maddie McDaniel. You've got Malaysia Fulwiley, Tessa Johnson, Joyce Edwards, Adele Tack. I mean, it is an embarrassment of riches. All right, so hopefully Payton will be healthy enough. She is fighting off pneumonia, which I found out earlier in the week. That's a tough deal. We wish her a speedy recovery. Maybe we get her and Mike Gillespie on with us next week. So enjoy, hopefully, what is a stress-free weekend of college football, because let's face it, Gamecock football, except for the Akron game, and then after you got in the Kentucky game and figured out they just could not move the ball. I mean, for me, it's been almost 50 years of passing a kidney stone or being, childbirth. That's what Gamecock football is like for the most part, or worse. That's why I have no hair. I pulled it all out. I kid. But I do like this team, and everything is out there for them. Go to the Garnet Out, support this team. If you can sell it out and have a great environment for a 12 o'clock game against LSU, and then a 7:30 game against Akron, that place better be jumping on next Saturday afternoon when we enter the month of Cocktober. So until next week, I'll be back, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks to everybody joining live and listening on Spotify and Apple Podcast. This is Keith Allsep for Hale McGranahan, and we're wishing a speedy recovery to my good friend Payton Titus. We'll be back same bat time, same bat channel next week for another Gamecock Pod Live. This is Keith Allsep, and I am out of here. God bless. Go Game.